call to order the October 8th special Timnath Town Council meeting. Ms. Peters Garcia, will you take the roll?
Yes. Mayor Robert Oxmacher,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner,
Here.
Councilmember Bill Jenkins,
Here.
Councilmember Jeremy Holt,
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
Okay, 4 of us are here, so we have a quorum. Councilmember Lake did let us know that she's otherwise detained this evening and would not be here. We have one business item for our special session today, which is item 2A, an executive session. At this point, is there a motion to go into executive session for conferences with an attorney for the town for the purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions under CRS 246402-4B relating to the pending lawsuit MP et al. Versus Poudre School District R1 et al. And mediation of the same.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of moving to executive session, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. All right, motion carries 4-0. We are in executive session. All right, we have returned from executive session. That will conclude our business. Unless there's objection, we shall adjourn the special session. You guys good going straight into it?
Yeah, I want to hit the
Okay.
bathroom real quick here.
I think it's that side. I'm out. Bus tour on Friday. Discuss that with them and see if they want to.
Do you think we can reschedule for the spring, maybe?
I think the goal is to educate as many of us as possible. It's Longmont, Westminster, so from 8 to 1.
I just can't make it swing this week.
Let's see what she did. I think Bill's in. Let me pull up see who. Yeah, Lisa said yes, but I don't know if her. All right, are we all present? Good to go? All right, I will call to order our Timnath Town Council work session for Tuesday, October 8th. Ms. Peters Garcia.
Yes. Mayor Robert Roxmacher,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner,
Here.
Councilmember Jeremy Holt,
Here.
Councilmember Bill Jenkins,
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
All right, there are 4 of us present. Councilmember Lake did let us know that she would not be attending today. So we have one business item today on the work session to discuss pedestrian crossing treatment guidelines and neighborhood traffic mitigation program. And with that, I'll turn it over to our community development and public works staff.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks for this time. So from my 34 years of experience, these programs that we're going to be presenting to you are best practices and are critical to communities. And I handed over the development of these programs over to Kim shortly after she started in the spring. And she has done an excellent job taking these programs forward. So with that, also with the time we have, I'll go ahead and turn it over to her real quick, and we'll get you going on. Is it working? The other one.
Good evening, council members. With me this evening are a couple consultants working on this project. We are talking about today pedestrian crossing treatment guidelines and the neighborhood traffic calming program. We wanted to take some time to share where we are in the project and just get your general thoughts as we continue to progress and develop these guidelines throughout the year. With me this evening are Martina Wilkinson and Bill Cowan. They come from 2 separate firms, but frequently participate and work together on numerous projects throughout northern Colorado. The prime consultant for this is Next Phase Engineering, which is represented tonight by Martina Wilkinson. Martina and her business partner, Joe Olson, are both longtime public service traffic engineers, including having been traffic engineers for Longmont, Larimer County, and Fort Collins. They now focus on work for public agencies, including operations, policies, and programs, development review support, and transportation safety. They have recently completed similar programs to what we're working on in Fort Collins and Adams County. Next Phase is supported by Fox Tuttle Transportation Group and is represented by Bill Cowan. Bill is also a previous public sector traffic engineer who worked for the city of Boulder for over 27 years. He helped develop the original pedestrian crossing treatment guidelines used by numerous communities in the Front Range and has developed several neighborhood speed management programs in Colorado. We are so excited to have them on our team to develop these guidelines and programs for us as we continue to take Timnath into the next steps. So with that, after the PowerPoint loads in 1 second, we will turn it over to them.
I just want to remind everyone to speak into the microphones. It's because we're streaming, it's easier for everybody to hear online when everybody speaks into their microphones. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder.
Thank you.
Nobody should mess with the plugs, apparently. We did that. There we go.
Oh, there we go.
All right, go for it, guys. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim, for that introduction. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Bill and I are pleased to be here this evening to discuss with you these two programs that we are working on. You received some basic overview information as a part of your council packets. We'll be going through that this evening, and then in addition to that, we'll be supplementing that information with a series of slides that we have. It was scheduled to be about 20 minutes or so of a slide presentation, and then time for questions and answer. We'll try to go through it pretty quickly, knowing that you're a little bit under a time constraint. And so if there's things that we gloss over in the slides that you have questions about, certainly ask them when we get to that point, and we'll go back and provide a little bit more detail. A little bit of purpose and maybe a little bit of a historical context about why we're even here this evening. There's really two reasons why we're here this evening. The first of which is I'm sure you're all aware, in August of last year, the fatal crash that occurred that took the life of Ollie Stratton. There was a safety audit that was completed after that crash with some specific recommendations that were in it. And in addition to that, your update to the Transportation Master Plan that was completed in February of this year also had some programmatic recommendations in that particular document. Those recommendations really were sort of twofold. The first recommendation had to do with the recommendation to create guidelines, town-wide guidelines for, how do you decide where pedestrian crossings go, how do you set speed limits, and a recommendation to create a neighborhood traffic mitigation program. The second recommendation was specifically to create a roadway safety program as a part of Timnath. What we're talking about today is really this current effort. That's that first bullet, the guidelines that we're looking at creating. That second bullet will be addressed through your federal Safe Streets for All grant that you were successful in getting through the federal government. That begins in the spring of 2025, and the effort that we're doing now will just dovetail directly into that when it begins. So first we'll talk about pedestrian crossing treatment guidelines, then we'll talk about neighborhood mitigation, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. Bill will do this part.
Good evening, members of Town Council. So every community values pedestrian crossing treatments. It's important part of the transportation system, and unfortunately there isn't a lot of national guidance on how to do that. It tends to fall to engineering judgment. And so we've found here in Colorado in particular that there's a lot of value in having some guidance in how to do that, help engineers to do that. And so that's really what we're helping the town with, is to create that guidance for pedestrian crossing treatments. The goals for this program, we obviously want your community to be safe. We want there to be mobility. We want these guidelines to be clear, concise, consistent. When decisions are made, it should be clear, why it was made there and how it pertains to decisions you'll make elsewhere. We want it to be supporting the best use of your resources. Your resources are limited, and we want to make sure they're used in the best manner for pedestrian crossing treatments. And then there's a standard of care component to this. You want to make sure your guidance is something that the general public would find reasonable and sort of meets the best standard of practice. So when it comes to pedestrian crossing treatments, what are we talking about? I mean, the standard is, the base is an unmarked crosswalk that's present at every or most locations in town. And then that has all the same rules and regulations of a marked crosswalk, which would be the second most common. After that, you would have a variety of enhancements that you would add to that. Median refuge islands and curb extensions, in-street signing, all of these things would make the crossing shorter and make it more likely that people would yield. And then the next level of pedestrian crossing treatment after that would be rectangular rapid flash beacons, or a lot of people call them flashing crosswalks. That's a crossing treatment that can have a lot of value for higher speed locations or for multi-lane roadways. And then you move into controlled crossing treatments, where previously the requirement was on the driver to ascertain that there was a need for them to stop. A controlled crossing treatment puts a red light in front of them and requires that they stop. So, and then grade separated crossings would be the last. So all of those crossing treatments we anticipate will be part of the toolbox for your guidance. So we have a lot of background in Colorado on crossing treatments, a good baseline to start with, but we wanted to make sure that, again, this was state of the practice. And so we did some research into not only other communities in Colorado, but also other communities in the nation. We also looked at a variety of national guidance and really tried to figure out how have the thoughts around this changed with the most recent research. We want to draw that in and make sure that your guidance is, again, more state of the practice than other communities whose guidance was created previously. And we've learned a few things from this. The main purpose of a pedestrian crossing treatment is to force gaps in traffic, right? That's really what it does, is it's creating a situation where a person is having trouble crossing and it's helping them get across the street. To do that, you want to make sure you're using those pedestrian crossing treatments in the right locations and that you're making good decisions about where to do them. Not every place is appropriate for a pedestrian crossing treatment, and it can be unsafe to use the wrong pedestrian crossing treatment in certain circumstances. You want your guidance to reflect that. Consistency for your community is also important. You're training people to react to these devices and be appropriately, and consistency is an important part of that. And then balancing the need of data and evaluation versus being responsive to the public. When we created these guidelines in Boulder, there was a very robust level of analysis that was associated with that. We feel like we can greatly improve upon that for your community. And so there's three basic considerations around this. The first is, what is fundamentally needed for a pedestrian crossing treatment? What do you just absolutely have to have in order to consider having a pedestrian crossing treatment there? Then what other factors should you consider in deciding whether to put a pedestrian crossing treatment in a place? And then also, once you've decided to do that, what would be the right pedestrian crossing treatment? And your guidelines will cover all of those things. So fundamental issues center around sight distance and visibility. People driving and people walking, they have to be able to see each other. If they can't see each other, or if you can't create a set of circumstances where sight distance is possible, then you should not put a pedestrian crossing treatment there. That's fundamental. Nighttime is also a concern. A lot of crashes happen at night. And so you want to make sure that you are able to provide reasonable lighting in that circumstance. If you need sight distance, you need lighting. If you have that, you've met your fundamental needs. And then other factors that you want to consider, probably one of the bigger ones historically has been just how much pedestrian crossing activity is there. A lot of research that was previously done in Boulder showed that you don't get very good compliance if you don't have a lot of people crossing. You train drivers to expect there not to be people crossing there, and then they don't comply when there are. And that used to be sort of the standard. You just don't build crossing treatments if you don't meet that criteria. But the state of the practice now is including sort of a latent demand component. There can be circumstances where you really want to build a pedestrian crossing treatment, even if the crossing activity isn't there yet. So maybe for connectivity or connecting land uses from that perspective. We anticipate that we will build your guidelines to start with that sort of latent demand component and then include this pedestrian usage if it doesn't meet that criteria. And then vehicle volume, there's like a minimum amount of traffic generally that you want to see before you put a pedestrian crossing treatment in, and that's because of this use that the crossing treatment has for forcing gaps. If the traffic volume is really low, you're already getting gaps in traffic, and you really don't need a pedestrian crossing treatment there. So you'll waste your resources, your limited resources, if you're putting crossing treatments in those locations. And then finally, distance to other crossing treatments. A couple of reasons why you would not want to put crossing treatments very close to each other, mostly based on the way that they interact with each other and from a queuing standpoint. But this picture is an example of one in Boulder where there was a hospital on one side, the parking structure on the other, very high crossing activity. And so even though it was only 100 feet away from another crossing treatment, we had to put it there. Again, this is where your staff's engineering judgment becomes important. And then having decided to install a pedestrian crossing treatment, what guidance do you have about what the appropriate crossing treatment should be? Most guidelines have a tool similar to the one on the screen here, a table or something of that nature. We are going to build something like that for your guidelines as well. The factors that are going to go into that fundamentally are the speed, because the faster that people are driving, the more robust of a crossing treatment you're going to need. The traffic volumes, because traffic volumes are sort of a proxy for gap, and the fewer gaps that there are, the more that you need a pedestrian crossing treatment to help people cross. The geometry is very important. If you have, for instance, 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction, you can have what's called the multi-lane threat scenario, where one vehicle stops, another one doesn't. Certain crossing treatments are better supporting of that crossing treatment than others. The type of pedestrian is important. School-age children, older people, anyone who's moving slower might change what type of crossing treatment you want. And then just understanding the difference between controlled and uncontrolled crossings. So from a management standpoint, first, figuring out how locations are going to be selected. We would anticipate that there'll be some component where your staff is identifying locations in your community, and then also a component where the public is identifying them, and there'll be ways for them to do that. And then once that happens, again, your resources are limited. It's entirely possible that there will be more requests for appropriate pedestrian crossing treatments than you have resources to build, and consequently you would like some way to prioritize that. So we're prepared to build or provide some guidance around how to prioritize and spend your resources in the most effective way for safety. So next steps. We are working on your guidelines currently. We anticipate having them complete and reviewed by your staff and then finalized by the end of this year. That should allow for implementation in 2025. The expectation is that there'll be some online opportunity for the public to engage and make requests. You also have your roadside or roadway safety action plan coming in 2025. It's expected that will be there'll be a significant part about pedestrian crossing treatments included in that. And then just a reminder that the scope is influenced by the extent to which you fund it. And with that, I'll turn it over to Martina.
All right, a lot of information, but we'll, again, feel free to ask questions when we get to the end of it, since we're going through it relatively quickly. So when we think about your neighborhood traffic calming program, These are the kinds of things that you so often hear. They're speeding on my street. I'm concerned there's cut through traffic. These are incredibly common comments that we get, and this is not unique to Timnath. The goals of a particular program that we have is to think about these requests in a way that offers you a toolbox where you have a lot of different tools to use. If there was a single answer to addressing neighborhood traffic concerns, we would have long implemented that. The reality is that it's complicated, it's complex, and it really requires this collaborative approach that's multifaceted with a lot of different tools in it in order to sort of chip away at these particular issues. So we want a pretty big toolbox. We want to support this idea that it's this partnership between the residents and the town. The town can't fix it by themselves. The residents can't fix it by themselves. It really needs to be a partnership. You want something that's a consistent process, that's a fair process, that's an understood process for how do we go about developing neighborhood mitigation in which neighborhoods and where. And then, like Bill was talking about too, it's always an item where you're really looking to make sure that you're using your public dollars in the very best possible way. So when we think about neighborhood traffic calming, what are we talking about? What's in those different buckets of your toolbox? And the first and foremost one that we often talk about is education. And sometimes that's sort of forgot a little bit because people very quickly jump to what can you come build in my neighborhood? But the education component is really important because the reality is that so oftentimes in neighborhoods, the majority of the traffic that's in your neighborhood are the people that live in your neighborhood. So you sort of have a set group of people that are traveling in a neighborhood, and if you can provide some education to those folks, there are times when that can actually be really quite effective. Education is also something that's inexpensive. It's quick, it's easy to deploy, it's not very complex, it's really responsive. Now, if the carrot doesn't work, you can go with the stick. The enforcement is certainly a bucket that's in there as well, and Chief Jones has been a part of our process in helping identify how the police department can be supportive of this particular effort. Then we start talking about some of these engineering solutions. When we talk about non-construction engineering solutions, these are, again, sort of relatively quick items that we can implement. Temporary driver feedback signs, we can talk about speed limit signs, we can talk about striping. So there's things that we can do from an engineering perspective that doesn't actually require us to go out and build big, expensive construction projects. And then the last bucket that we talk about is the tier 2 engineering options, is what we call it. These are physical construction options. They fall into 2 groups. Horizontal elements, these are things that sort of narrow up the road and make you feel like you need to slow down a little, and then vertical elements, and the poster childs for those are your speed humps that can really speak to the speed there. And so we'll be talking about both of those. What is not in the toolbox? And the reason that we don't recommend these items to be in your toolbox is because we generally find that they are not effective. And in fact, some of these items, when you implement them, even with the best of intentions, they can actually be detrimental to safety. And so, this is sort of a reminder that these are things that are not in our toolbox because we have tools that are more effective to use than what's on this particular list. We, as with the pedestrian crossing treatment guidelines, we've done an awful lot of research in the area, around the country, best practices. This is just a visual that tells you the kinds of elements that various jurisdictions in this area have for their traffic calming programs. The green dots mean that they have those particular things. Really what it says is that most organizations sort of use a comprehensive approach where they're doing a lot of different things as a part of their calming program. The key takeaways from what others are doing is that the ability to respond to residents is really helpful. It's incredibly frustrating when residents call and say, this is a challenge, and staff doesn't have something to say. If you can just say, I'm sorry, we don't really have anything we can do, it's incredibly frustrating for everyone. The scope and the scale and the size of your program can vary tremendously. So Aurora funds their program at more than $1 million a year. The city of Fort Collins funds theirs at $120,000. And so the same kinds of programs can really function in a lot of different scopes and scales depending on what kind of a budget and what your interests are. Staffing is important. find that educational and tier one visual elements are really important, sort of as stepping stones and strategies to begin with because they're so quick to deploy. And then tier two physical elements, they need some kind of a prioritization, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we already talked a little bit about the importance of the education component. So what does an overall program maybe look like for Timnath? And we would recommend that you use sort of this sequential process where you quickly deploy the least complex, least costly, quickest things that you can implement very quickly. So you start with education. As soon as someone calls, they get free yard signs, they get a neighborhood meeting. There's things that you can do to really support the educational component. If that's not really working or if it's not satisfactory, then you start moving into those engineering but non-construction options. Let's put out some radar feedback signs. Let's do some more of those. And then only, if these lesser actions are not producing the results that you're looking for, then you move the neighborhood into what these tier two potential for construction options are. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that works here in a minute. And then the enforcement, again, that's also a piece of it. It's a little bit separate from the tiered approach because that's sort of an ongoing item that staff will be coordinating with the chief. Considerations for tier two construction projects. And the reason that we have these considerations is because these are costly projects, take a little bit longer to implement, and they also have the largest potential for downside. And what I mean by that is that there's potential for impact to your maintenance crews. There's potential for impact to your snow plows. There's potential for impact to your emergency service providers. And there's potential for neighborhoods and some people in neighborhoods that very much don't want these devices. And so we want to be able to make this thoughtful. We want to be judicious about when and where we do this, but we don't want to make it onerous or bureaucratic. And so that's where you get some of these considerations. We want to have multiple neighborhood champions. We want it to be something that the neighborhood has ownership of and is helping develop consensus about. We want locations to be able to be prioritized. If you get a lot of requests in, then you need to be able to say, we have X amount of money, and so we're going to identify which locations have the biggest upside potential, and that's where we're going to put them first. And then, the next year's funding will go to other projects. Projects should be bundled together so you get better economies of scale when you construct them together. And then anytime that you have neighborhoods that are working through this process, anytime that you have neighborhoods that don't finish the process, again, we want to continue to support them with education and tier one options. There's a piece there, the third bullet down that I didn't specifically mention, that requires of a consensus process. That's something where we're looking for neighborhoods that are pursuing specifically speed bumps, that we want them to have this consensus building process where there's a super majority in the neighborhood that really wants these before they go in. We've seen too many neighborhoods or municipalities where they've gone in and put in speed bumps because they have a really vocal minority of residents that want them, and then a year later they're tearing them out because so many people are not happy with them. We want to make sure that there's a sort of a potential parallel process for your town staff to identify locations where some kind of traffic calming might be appropriate. This would most likely be along, not internal to neighborhood streets, but sort of between neighborhoods. Similar kind of a toolbox, and those locations could be identified by town staff. We want to leverage maintenance projects. We want to leverage other projects that might be coming through. And so anytime you have an opportunity to say, hey, we're going to overlay this road, would it make sense to stripe differently? We want the town to be able to say, hey, this would make sense as well. So next steps, much like the pedestrian crossing treatment piece, we'll be developing this whole process and the guidelines through the rest of 2024. We'll look towards the beginning of the implementation in 2025. Most likely, any kind of construction projects, would be town-initiated construction projects in 25, because the first neighborhoods that'll come in with any kind of interest, it'll take us a little bit of time for them to work through the consensus building process before they're ready for neighborhood construction projects. Certainly, the educational piece, those tier one pieces, will be funded in the very first year. Kim, we're going to turn it back over to you.
All right, that's their presentation. We were just wondering if you guys had any general thoughts or questions for our consultants while they're here and as they're still developing the guidance and program.
Great. Martina and Bill, thank you both very much for being here and for your hard work on this. Bill, you and I actually collaborated on this probably 20 years ago in Boulder. Really? Yeah, I was with the university there, and the deployment of the Hawk Light signal on Regent, and some of the education and actual enforcement stuff there. So, yeah, it's not an issue that's solved overnight, but appreciate your expertise and being here. This is very much an important issue for our town. Just yesterday, Mayor Pro Tem Wagner and I were meeting with the principals of the local schools, and that was absolutely a topic area in terms of, safety in and around the schools. Certainly the tragic death of the child, is something that's in our mind, but this is a topic that has been in front of the town long before that. So I'm just really excited that this is happening, that we got some federal funding to assist with this. So thank you all. Council, questions, comments?
Oh, thank you. That looks very promising.
Yeah, again, thanks staff. Thank you guys for doing this. I think next to when are we going to get a non-Starbucks drive-through, this is probably the number one thing that I get texted on a regular basis from people by the park or by the school is when are we adding more? So the focus on this, and this is super thorough, more than I could ever have thought. So good job on this, and I can't wait to see it come to fruition.
Yeah, thank you, town staff. This is amazing, and I like the idea of having a toolbox, right? Like having the ability for town staff to be able to do their jobs in a way that something that I've just never thought of before. So this is amazing. So thank you.
All right, anything else?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. Appreciate it. We'll be back in the end of the year with the programs ready to begin implementation.
We look forward to it. All right, thank you very much. Staff, anything else?
No, I think we're good. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. I guess we can go ahead and adjourn here, and then we'll reconvene for our regular meeting at 6. discussion. I have one person that is signed up, so Ms. Lee Godfrey, welcome.
Thank you for a few minutes of your time. I'm Lee Godfrey. I live at 4403 Caramel Street in Timnath, which is Timnath Lakes on the other side of Harmony. I wish I had come for the presentation you had beforehand because I wanted to speak to the Parkway, the Timnath Parkway, which is going to be opening here before too long. My concerns are this. I see the signs going up that say 40 miles per hour on that parkway. And I had to laugh. I mean, people are not going to go 40, they're going to go 55. But there is a particular intersection, 4th, that goes across into Timnath Old Town that a lot of people use. They're using it right now, and it's great because there's no traffic. But as they're building this, I haven't seen any indication that there's going to be any kind of crosswalk right there. What I would really love to see is a 4-way stop just to slow people down, but I'm pretty sure that's dreaming. But I know that you guys are going to be talking about crosswalks, especially the ones with the flashing lights, as you get your report and so forth and so on. But I just wanted to make you aware that that is an intersection that's going to need something. There are little kids on bikes that like to ride to the coffee shop and to the elementary school. So that's really all I had to say. And I hope you'll just consider that as that thing gets ready to open, because I'm pretty sure it'll be a speedway. That's what I'm afraid of. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Godfrey. Thank you for being here. Thank you for attending council chat. I appreciate that. And if you do want to watch, the work session that we just had on this topic is recorded, and so you can view that and take a look as well. Thank you. Very good. That's all I have on the list, but is there anyone else present who would like to speak for public comment? All right, seeing none, we will proceed now to the consent agenda, which consists of 3 items this evening. First, approval of the September 24th Town Council meetings. Second, the September 20th check register. And third, the September 27th check register. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Well, very good. It's moved and seconded. Any comments or concerns before we vote? Very good. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, consent agenda passes unanimously. We will move on to mayor and council reports. I'll open up first. Any council members, anything? All right. I do have a couple of updates. Last week, I did the council chat at Timnath Beer Works. That was very well attended. We had 24 people sign in, and I think there are actually a couple other present that we didn't catch on the sign-up list. Lots of good discussion there. Some of the topics that came up were Main Street, the future of Main Street, and discussion about the eventual plan for Main Street to terminate on the south end near where the sign is now. So we talked about that. Some community members expressed their concern that Main Street should not close. We talked about the fact that this has been a decision that's been in the works for literally going back to 2004, and that that is a decision that has been made. Main Street will be closing after the Parkway opens, but that there will still be multiple ways to access Old Town, including off of Cornhusk, off of 2nd, and off of 4th, which was just discussed. There are a number of concerns brought up about traffic. As mentioned, the Parkway and 4th was discussed. Also, there were some questions about Rendezvous, which goes through the Timnath Trail neighborhood there. And so I referred some questions there to staff. I appreciate staff helping answer those. Pedestrian safety was a big topic. I encouraged people to tune into the work session that we just had. Folks asked about metro districts. And so we discussed the fact that there are 3 informational videos on our website, Metro Districts 101, 201, 301, that are available for people that want to know more about those and kind of the pros and cons. Folks asked questions about business incentives. The town does currently have a $100,000 fund for business incentives. Individual businesses can qualify for up to $35,000 if they apply, but that's been a program that it hasn't been utilized a whole lot, so certainly getting the word out about that. There's also some discussion about economic development in general, whether or not the town ought to be considering an economic development dedicated position. So we talked about the fact that that topic is ongoing, that we're in the middle of our budget process, and that's something that we have been discussing. People asked about the future of a rec center. We talked about the fact that is something that is ongoing, that there is currently a Path to Play community survey on our recreational facilities out there. Encouraged folks, if they hadn't, to contribute to that. Talked about the fact that we do have a rec center feasibility study that's underway, and so we will be evaluating all of that. So it was a very productive discussion. It was wonderful to see so many people turn out, and I appreciated that. We'll also note on the topic of recreation, I know currently sign-up is open for the winter recreational programming, specifically basketball. I think that sign-up's available for maybe another 2 weeks, but if folks are interested in getting in on that league, that would be great. Before we move on, any other updates? Okay. Move on then to our regular business item. Beginning with business item 6A, which is a Fire Prevention Week proclamation. And I will turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Wagner.
I have the honor of reading the 2024 Fire Prevention Week proclamation. Whereas Fire Prevention Week is October 6th through October 12th, 2024, and the theme is smoke alarms, make them work for you. And whereas this year's focus is working smoke alarms and is in response to the National Fire Alarm Protection Association data, which shows that the majority of U.S. home fire deaths continue to occur in homes with no smoke alarms or no working smoke alarms. And whereas having working smoke alarms reduces the risk of dying in a home by 54%. And whereas roughly 3 out of 5 fire deaths occur in homes with either no smoke alarms or no working smoke alarms. And whereas Poudre Fire Authority recently responded to a fire in which a man died in a home with no working smoke alarms. And whereas PFA authorizes Poudre Fire Authority, prioritizes fire prevention through outreach, education, and the International Fire Code, and smoke alarm installation events and support. Local firefighters are asking for our help in keeping families and the community safe. They're asking for our help to be sure to install smoke alarms in every bedroom outside each separate sleeping area, like a hallway, and on each level, including the basement of a home. Make sure smoke alarms meet the needs of all people in the home, including those with a sensory or physical disability. Test smoke alarms at least once a month by pushing the test button, and replace all smoke alarms when they are at least 10 years old or failed testing. Even hardwired alarms need to be replaced because the sensors expire. This proclamation is dated this day, October 8th, 2024.
Great, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and I want to thank Fire Chief Bergston with the Poudre Fire Department for reaching out to us and help coordinate this. I believe we have some representatives from the Poudre Fire Department here to come accept the proclamation and hopefully be willing to take a photo with council here. All right, we will now move on to business item 6B, which is the first reading and setting of a public hearing to take place on October 22nd, 2024 at 6 p.m. regarding ordinance number 15, series 2024, an ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 4 of the Timnath Municipal Code regarding municipal court parking violations and to authorize entry of judgment of liability by default. As is now our practice on first readings, instead of having these on consent agenda, we ask staff to provide a brief presentation just to orient us and the community so that we can be thoughtful when this comes before us for public hearing and second reading. So with that, I will ask Ms. Steffel to bring us up to speed.
Thank you. So this is actually just a fix that was brought to our attention by the municipal court, and they were having their docket be filled up by parking tickets. As an example, this week they had more parking tickets than moving traffic violations, and they had 36 parking tickets on the docket, and I don't believe any of them actually appeared. So when the current practice is when no one appears for that parking ticket, they have to send out certified mail, which is a cost for the court, and they have to send out several certified letters. What this would do instead is allow the court to issue a default judgment, impose a fine, and then that fine goes right to collections. So it actually just makes this a more efficient process for our court. And even though the ordinance before you does not have red lines, it really just added a few words in some of these sections. We already have default judgments for many of the traffic offenses of small amounts of points, and we added to that they can also be entered for 0-point parking violations.
All right, thank you, Ms. Steffel, and thank you, I assume, Lizzie, for identifying this. Well done. Council, we'll have a full hearing, but any clarifications or questions right now?
Quick question. Thankfully, I have yet and don't plan on getting a parking ticket in our town. But do we have any leniency, like Fort Collins, right, to our parking? I think your first slap on the wrist is a nice letter saying next time we're going to charge you. Is it, or do we go straight to charging? No, we don't have any. Sounds good. Okay.
Don't get one.
If there are no questions, at this time we would entertain a motion to approve on first reading and to set a public hearing on October 22nd, 2024 at 6 p.m. for Ordinance 15, Series 2024.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, council, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the first reading and setting a public hearing on October 22nd, 2024 at 6 p.m. signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, motion carries 4-0. Move on to business item 6C, Resolution 65, Series 2024, a resolution approving the intergovernmental agreement for reimbursement of construction and related expenses for lowering North Weld County Water District 36-inch water line and culvert replacement in the town of Timnath, Colorado Boulevard. Mr. Smith.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to present the resolution approving the IGA between the town and North Weld County Water District. As you said, it's for the reimbursement of costs associated with the project to replace a culvert and water lines in Colorado Boulevard about midway between Prospect and Highway 14. Excuse me, I'm getting a frog in my throat all of a sudden. If you look in the packet and you look at the plan set, there's some more information in there. There's some pictures, there's a vicinity map, so it gives you a good idea of where that's at. But fairly recently, within the last year or so, that culvert failed, and so it plugged up and it hasn't been draining water. So staff from the Timnath Public Works team and North Weld County Water alternate going out there and pumping it out. So there again, there's some pictures in the packet that kind of demonstrate the ponding that is occurring on the upstream side of that. So we're trying to alleviate that issue. So this is a joint effort between the district and the town, sharing the costs 50-50. We had budgeted $300,000 to cover the expense of the project. I'm happy to say that the project was bid for construction last Friday afternoon. The low bidder came in at $243,848. So when you include engineering and construction management costs on top of that, the town's share would be just under $217,000. So well below the $300,000 budget that we had allocated. So it's a pretty straightforward project. I will say that Colorado Boulevard will probably be completely closed for about a week or so during construction. We're just not sure how we could one lane it or keep traffic flowing through there. But I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah. So a couple questions on this one. So what is kind of the life of a culvert? And how old is this culvert?
The design life of a typical culvert, and usually we would use reinforced concrete pipe, for example. Typical design life would be 50 to 70 years, 75 years, so quite a long time. I don't know when this pipe was put in, but based on the material it was made out of, which is clay, I'm guessing it's probably been in the ground probably 50 years or so. So they just haven't used that material for pipe for quite a while, unless it was salvaged material and that's what they threw in the ground. But we really don't have any records for sure.
And kind of looking here, and I appreciate the pictures, and I thank you. I was looking at the bid, and I had asked a question about the bid costs. I was glad they came in underneath. Are there other is there examples where the town has shared a cost for a project like this, or are there examples where different other cities or towns have shared costs like this?
I'm not aware of, at least in my short tenure, of Timnath sharing costs. We may have very well done that, but I'm not personally aware of that. I have done projects like this in the past, and I know Justin has as well.
So it's not unusual to share these costs with the water district?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Any other questions? All righty. I'm always amazed at how expensive sidewalks are, and now I'm amazed at how expensive tubes are. All right, this time is there a motion to approve Resolution 65, Series 2024, resolution approving the intergovernmental agreement for reimbursement of construction and related expenses for lowering the North Weld County Water District 36-inch water line and culvert replacement in the town of Timnath?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, council discussion?
Important. Needs to get done.
I agree. I drove by there recently, and it was filled with water, so I want to make sure we protect our roadways.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't spend this money now, it will likely cost us much more in the future. I do ask the question. This is a right-of-way that required at some point, and I wonder, did we do our due diligence at the time when all that happened? But we're here now. It makes sense today, so I will support it. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Carries 4-0 with Councilmember Lake absent. We'll now move on to, and thank you, Earl, appreciate that. Move on to Resolution 66, Series 2024, a resolution updating the strategic plan for the town of Timnath. Town Manager Adams.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. What we have before you tonight is an update to the strategic plan. This is based off of the strategic plan that was developed in 2022, updated with feedback from our current council. Not only did we experience change in some of the council seats, but the 2-year time frame is a good time to be looking back at a strategic plan anyways for any updates. We did change the formatting a little bit, but the content actually is pretty similar to what you had before with 2022, but it does have a few additions that came from discussions with our current council. With that, you folks were there. If you do have any questions, I'm happy to take a run at those, but we're just looking for your vote of approval to update that strategic plan.
All right, thank you, Manager Adams. And as you mentioned, we were all present at the work session. I know you sent out a draft of this, I don't know, maybe 5-6 weeks ago. I appreciate the multiple council members that provided a comment on that, including specifically Councilmember Jenkins, Mayor Pro Tem Wagner, and I had some thoughts as well. So thank you for incorporating all that. Council, any questions? Okay. Well, at this time, a motion to approve Resolution 66, Series 2024, resolution updating the strategic plan for the town of Timnath would be in order.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, council discussion, beginning with Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, I would just like to thank Aaron for getting the format consistent across all of the and staff who worked on it as well. I think it's a well-presented document, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, staff. I really like the idea of having projects, goals, action items. I think that's great. I think it gives everyone in the organization a great way to look at how to align to those. So great work, Aaron. Thank you.
I just, obviously being new up here, having, the work sessions, talking through this, seeing, the back and forth, the comments, and actually seeing it put into action. And I think I'll echo exactly what both Luke and Bill said. The layout of it, the structure of it is super easy. It kind of holds us accountable and lines it out right in front of us. So great job.
Concur with all that, and I hope that we'll continue the practice that we had last year of quarterly updates on progress. That's very helpful to know that we're making progress and to check things off as they occur. So with that, all those in favor of the resolution updating the strategic plan for the town of Timnath signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Once again, carries 4-0 with Councilmember Lake absent. Our final agenda item is Agenda Item 6E, Resolution 67, Series 2024, resolution approving the formation of an Old Town Steering Committee. Director Robinson.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm happy to present this resolution before you for your consideration to create a steering committee for Old Town. As you recall, we had a work session back on September 24th to discuss some of the ideas and concerns of Old Town and area residents. And one of the recommendations that staff presented was to create a steering committee to help us prioritize, make recommendations to town council. With that work session, the direction was given to let's create a steering committee. So this resolution is to create a pathway forward. The idea behind the steering committee is it will be created with the idea that they will present their report back to council on strategies, priorities, and recommendations related to some of those issues. The creation of the steering committee is not permanent, it's temporary in nature. The idea is to create it for at least 2 years with the ability to extend it in 6 months. The Community Development Department will provide the staff support to that committee, so we'll send out agendas and minutes and help facilitate those meetings. The meetings will be run by a consensus board agenda, so on the operation of consensus, there'll be 5 standing members or ex officio members of the town and 6 appointed members, of which the standing members will appoint. We have an application ready to be available for the community very quickly after tonight, so we can mobilize this steering committee if you decide to approve this resolution. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Council questions? Excellent. Then is there a motion to approve the resolution approving the formation of the Old Town Steering Committee?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved by Mayor Pro Tem Wagner and seconded by Councilmember Holt. Council discussion beginning with Mayor Pro Tem Wagner.
Yeah, I feel like we've, gosh, this has been a long time coming, and I really like where this is heading, and I like all the work that's been put into this, along with the really thoughtful process of putting the membership together, so I will be in support of this.
Councilmember Holt.
Yep, I agree. Actually, I like the format. I like the amount of people involved. I mean, I think moving this forward, getting Old Town the attention it needs, and reviving that area and put a good plan in place is, to Luke's point, it's been a long time coming. So full support of this.
Councilman Jenkins.
Yep, totally in support of this. The sooner the better.
Very good. I also will support this wholeheartedly. I know that the standing committee members or the initial committee, the ex officio committee members will run the process for selecting the community members. There will be 6 community spots on this. I suppose while I want this to move forward expeditiously, I want to make sure that we do a really good job of getting the word out in terms of applications, and that we at least leave enough sufficient time for to get those who would be interested, and particularly those that could really contribute to the effort, the opportunity to apply. So, any other comments? Okay. All those in favor of approving the resolution forming the Old Town Steering Committee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Once again, carries 4-0 with Councilmember Lake absent. Council, anything else before we adjourn? All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate